Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are undertaking a very specific kind of mission. We aren't just skimming the surface of a historical moment.
No.
We are plunging, and I mean exhaustively, into the remnants of a single life. A life that's been sort of fractured across a collection of really disparate primary source documents, all from Dublin, all from July of 1895.
That's right. And for you listening, the objective here is really about getting foundational knowledge. We've been handed what feels like a complete narrative puzzle. I mean, we've got medical notes,
Right.
a police report, confidential clerical memos, a public obituary, and then, and this is the really incredible part, the searingly intimate diary entries of a young boy.
Yeah.
It's a tragedy told through, administrative paperwork and secret thoughts. It's an amazing collection.
It's a stunning stack of sources. It gives us this full 360-degree view of the decline of one Reverend James Flynn. And our goal isn't just to summarize. Our goal is to narrate and analyze every single detail.
Every single one.
From the specific cause of his paralysis to the precise, heartbreaking look of his sister's worn-down boots, we want to construct the full, complex architecture of his physical, his psychological, and his community collapse.
And no detail is too small?
No, they're all crucial anchors in this story.
And the setting for all this is, of course, Dublin, 1895. Father Flynn was a retired Roman Catholic priest and, importantly, a scholar. So his passing was never going to be a simple affair. But these documents, they reveal a complex human story that moves so far beyond the dignified death announced in the papers.
It really does.
His final years were defined by a decline that left this shadow not just on his family, but, and this is what's so fascinating, on the young mind that he mentored.
Okay, let's unpack this total collapse.
Yeah.
And let's start where the public story both began and ended, with the formal records that, tried to tidy up his life.
We should begin, as any historical account really must, with the public narrative. The story that was given to the community in the Freeman's Journal, that's document 1, this is the community's first and definitely most sanitized look at the event.
The headline is, it's as simple as it gets, Death of the Reverend James Flynn. It says he died on the 1st of July, 1895, at the age of 65. And he was formerly associated with S. Catherine's Church on Meath Street. That's the core biographical data.
Just the facts. And the official cause of death is, well, it's very broad. The paper attributes it to declining health for some time, having suffered from a series of paralytic seizures.
Right.
And that's the acceptable public explanation. It focuses on frailty, on age, and it completely obscures the more complicated neurological and psychological issues that we're about to uncover.
But what immediately elevates him, what makes his death newsworthy in this paper, is his pedigree. He wasn't just another dedicated parish servant.
Not at all.
The paper makes a point of saying he was a scholar of the Irish College in Rome.
And that credential carried significant weight in late 19th century Dublin. I mean, that signals a deep intellectual grounding, a really rigorous theological training. It sets him apart.
It does. It says he served his parish with devotion for many years until his health, forced him into retirement.
And his retirement residence, that gives us some crucial context about the family's status. He spent his latter years at the premises on Great Britain Street. And this place was, simultaneously, the residence of his 2 surviving sisters, Miss Eliza Flynn and Miss Nanny Flynn.
And the location of their drapery establishment.
Exactly. So it wasn't a monastery or some dedicated sick house. It was a home that was also operating as a business. There's a public-facing element to their private life.
And the obituary frames this setting very gently, doesn't it? He calls it a quiet retreat where his sisters tended to him with notable care and affection.
It does. It's working very hard to reinforce this image of a dignified, private decline, supported by devoted, saintly family members.
All very tidy.
Very. And finally, the formal steps taken after his death are laid out very clearly. Father O'Rourke of the parish was entrusted with the arrangements. He's noted as a steadfast support to the sisters.
So that ensures the community that the church is managing the process with the proper solemnity.
Right. It all culminates in a solemn mass for the repose of his soul. The public narrative is one of piety and respect, completely untainted by any of the rumors of his actual decline.
But that public dignity is immediately contrasted by The administrative coldness of the Dublin Metropolitan Police. We have document 6 here, which is Constable R. Walsh's report from July 8, 1895. And what's fascinating here is why the police are involved at all.
Yeah, that's a key point. And it's important to stress, as Constable Walsh clarifies right away, this was not a criminal matter.
No foul play suspected.
Not at all. This was an informal inquiry. It was prompted by nothing more than regular beat observations. The goal was purely administrative vigilance.
So just checking in on things.
Essentially, yeah. The goal was to, and I'm quoting here, assess general community sentiment and ensure no underlying civil concerns require addressing. Basically, the police are just checking the public pulse to make sure the death of this prominent, if retired figure doesn't spill over into any kind of unrest or unruliness.
And what did the constable observe at the residence, at the drapery shop on Great Britain Street?
He reports that on the day of the death and on the subsequent days, the premises were orderly and quiet. The family was visibly following all the customs of mourning. He notes the shutters were drawn and a crepe bouquet was affixed to the door.
So they were doing everything by the book, publicly.
By the book. These details, the drawn shutters, the crepe bouquet, they confirmed the family was going to great lengths to adhere to standard, visible mourning practices. They were projecting respectability and conformity in the face of what we know is immense private grief and, as we'll see, considerable controversy around the circumstances of his decline.
And the visitors.
He notes that visitors were limited to family, close acquaintances, and clergy. And crucially, no public disturbances were noted.
So the police assessment confirms that the public sphere was completely undisturbed.
Exactly. Constable Walsh's conclusion is crisp and, purely functional. The death caused no public order issues. The situation is a private matter of grief and reflection, and no further police action is recommended.
The civil authorities are satisfied. The internal family crisis will not become a community problem.
And that's where their interest ends. But for us, that's where the real story begins. We can now move behind those drawn shutters, away from the public perception, and into the harrowing reality of Father Flynn's physical body, which is documented so meticulously in Dr. A. White's case notes. That's document 7, compiled just days after his death on July 10th, 1895.
And Dr. White's notes are so critical because they synthesize information from a few different places, right?
Yeah.
It's the postmortem observations, but also, more intimately, conversations with the 3 people who saw him constantly.
Right. Reverend O'Rourke and the 2 Mrs. Flynn, Eliza, and Nanny.
So this makes the source both clinical and deeply anecdotal.
Absolutely. And the clinical diagnosis confirms the public's generalized statement about paralytic seizures, but it provides the precise tragic cause. The immediate cause of death was a third and fatal cerebrovascular accident.
A stroke.
A massive stroke, what was commonly called apoplexy at the time. And this followed 2 prior non-fatal strokes. Dr. White explicitly states this is, quote, consistent with the observed paralysis and gradual deterioration noted by his caregivers.
So this places the death squarely in the realm of catastrophic neurological failure.
It does. It sets the stage for a story that is fundamentally one of a loss of physical control, which, as we'll see, mirrors his loss of spiritual and psychological control.
Okay, let's delve into the actual symptoms that Dr. White documented, because this is where we really start to humanize this neurological assault.
Yes. The most defining feature of his motor function, according to the doctor, was a pronounced and constant tremor in the hands.
And this wasn't just a minor thing.
Oh, no. This was a permanent, visible disruption to his entire existence. It was always there.
And we get that perfect, specific micro-tragedy that really brings this constant struggle to life. The tremor was so severe, Dr. White notes, that it impeded the most basic tasks.
Yes, like self-administering snuff without significant spillage.
Wow. That small detail. Just think about that for a second. The humiliation, the constant frustration of losing control over something as simple as a comforting habit day in and day out.
It's the little indignities.
It is. It just underscores the profound dignity that was lost to this illness long before he actually died.
Exactly. It's not just a medical fact in a report. It's a narrative motif of internal chaos spilling out into the open. And beyond the tremor, his physical deterioration was marked by this profound mental and physical collapse. In his final days, his sisters frequently found him in a stuporous state.
What does that mean exactly, a stuporous state?
The notes describe it vividly. Lying back in his chair, his breviary fallen to the floor and his mouth open.
The breviary.
Mm-hmm.
His prayer book.
His prayer book. The tool of his trade, of his vocation, literally falling from his grasp.
And Dr. White's interpretation of this goes beyond simple fatigue, right?
It does. For him, the dropped breviary, the open mouth, it all suggests a loss of muscular control and possible periods of diminished consciousness. He was losing the physical ability to hold the symbols of his office, which so perfectly mirrors the spiritual crisis he was undergoing. The man was, quite literally, failing to hold himself together.
This is where Dr. White's notes offer, I think, the deepest insight into the why of Father Flynn's decline, rather than just the what. He posits this complex thesis.
He does. He argues that the total condition was a result of the complex interplay of organic and psychological factors. It's a remarkably modern, holistic view of human failure for 1895.
So let's separate those two from them. The organic cause is clear, right?
It is. The physical paralysis was, in the doctor's words, likely the result of successive cerebral hemorrhages, the strokes that were progressively destroying his brain tissue. That's the hardware failure.
But then there's the psychological catalyst. And this is what seems to have driven the narrative of his decline in the Dublin community.
Yes. Dr. White believed the psychological trauma of the Chalice incident, an incident we haven't explored yet, but one which clearly shattered his mental state, seemingly acted as a catalyst.
How so?
It exacerbated a pre-existing predisposition towards nervous anxiety. So the trauma didn't cause the stroke, not directly, but it amplified his vulnerability and it seems accelerated the whole decline.
And Dr. White goes even deeper than that, exploring the lifelong stressors that made this man so susceptible in the first place.
He does. He cites the immense weight of his sacerdotal duties as a reported lifelong burden. And we need to pause and really contextualize this for a man like Flynn, a Rome scholar. This isn't just a job.
No, it's everything.
It's everything. And think about the two specific duties that are cited. The gravity of the Eucharist and the inviolable secrecy of the confessional.
Let's break those down. For a priest, the Eucharist is. It's literally handling the body and blood of Christ.
The most sacred act imaginable. So if you are already of a nervous disposition, the fear of performing that ceremony incorrectly or unworthily is immense. It's a constant, high-stakes performance of faith.
And then there's the confessional.
The secrecy of the confessional, on the other hand, means you are absorbing the darkest secrets and moral burdens of an entire community, and you have to carry that weight in absolute, total solitude. You can't talk to anyone about it.
So you have this immense, lifelong external pressure, and then you combine that with his internal disposition. The doctor noted that Flynn's life was described by his own sister as being crossed.
Yes, and that he was considered a disappointed man. These factors, Dr. White concludes, contributed to a fragile psychological constitution.
He was essentially a ticking time bomb.
He was a ticking time bomb just waiting for a specific trauma to set it off, and that trauma arrived in the most symbolically potent way possible.
So we move from this pre-existing fragility to the moment of fracture, the broken chalice. This event, though technically minor, became the spiritual fault line in his life.
It did. And we hear the distress and the absolute conviction of his sister, Eliza Flynn, in Document 3. She says it so simply, so definitively. It was that chalice he broke. That was the beginning of it.
No ambiguity there for her.
None whatsoever. She attributes the start of his visible public decline directly and solely to this one accident.
And she reveals that the community, and even the clergy, tried to reassure him. She notes, "They say it was all right, that it contained nothing, but still."
Yeah, but still is so powerful. The fact that the contents might not have been consecrated, and therefore the theological implications were zero, did absolutely nothing to calm Father Flynn's inner turmoil.
And she also mentions the attempt to mitigate blame, saying they say it was the boy's fault, referring to an altar server.
But then she immediately undercuts that by emphasizing that Father Flynn was so nervous, she knew the fault lay in his reaction, not the action itself.
And this is all confirmed by Father O'Rourke's confidential memo, Document 2.
It is. O'Rourke details the formal inquiry that was held, which confirmed two key facts. The contents were not consecrated, and the fault was, in fact, partially attributed to the altar server.
So officially he was in the clear.
Completely. O'Rourke even dismissively labels the event theologically inconsequential. A trifle.
But Dr. White confirms that for Flynn, it was catastrophic.
For Flynn, it wasn't an accident. It was the ultimate failure of his vocation. It became the proof he was always looking for that he was unworthy. It exacerbated his pre-existing anxiety and became the critical psychological trigger that accelerated his descent into a visible breakdown.
And what were the symptoms of that breakdown immediately after the trauma?
The symptoms manifested as acute scrupulosity. Both Dr. White and Father O'Rourke use that exact word. They note that he became increasingly scrupulous.
Let's be precise about what that meant for him, for our listeners. Scrupulosity, in this context, it's an obsessive anxiety over moral and religious failings.
It's a spiritual OCD, in a way.
Exactly. So for a man who already felt the immense pressure of the Eucharist and the confessional, breaking the chalice, the vessel that holds the consecrated host, it became this undeniable proof of his deep-seated unworthiness, a failure that went so far beyond the physical accident.
And this scrupulosity led directly to withdrawal. Eliza Flynn recounts that after the chalice incident, he just began to mope by himself. He started avoiding conversation, avoiding social interaction.
He shut down.
A complete shutting down of his social and clerical life. Dr. White views this as a profound melancholia, a depressive state.
And Eliza's personal conclusion is just heartbreaking, because it reflects such an astute understanding of her brother's temperament. She felt the duties of the priesthood were simply too much for him.
She did. She reiterated that his life was crossed and that he was a disappointed man, which cements this idea that his psychological structure was just too fragile to sustain the immense professional weight that had been placed upon it.
He failed, not because of a lack of devotion.
No, perhaps because of an excess of it. He failed because of his own internal wiring.
Which brings us to the incident that confirmed the community's worst fears. The event that solidified his reputation as mentally unstable, the moment he was found in his confession box. This is the event that truly destroyed his dignity.
It is, and the circumstances leading up to the discovery really heighten the tension. As we can piece together from both Eliza Flynn's account and Father O'Rourke's memo, Father Flynn was urgently needed for a sick call one evening.
And sick calls are emergencies.
They are. They require a priest to be immediately available, often to administer last rites. It's a life or death situation. But he was nowhere to be found at the Great Britain Street residence.
So a search began. Eliza notes they looked high up and low down. The urgency must have been immense.
It must have. And it was the church clerk, perhaps knowing the priest's old habits, his old haunts, who suggested checking his former domain, the chapel. They got the keys and opened the chapel and brought in a light to look for him.
And the description of the finding, it's deeply unsettling.
It is. They located him seated in his confession box in the dark. Eliza says he was wide awake, but emitting this soft, persistent, involuntary noise, an unintelligible murmur, which other sources confirm was a soft, uncanny laughter.
Just think about the symbolism here. He's found in the place of ultimate clerical responsibility, the place where he absorbed the sins of the world.
But he's alone, in the dark, and laughing softly to himself. It's a profound tableau of a completely broken vocation.
How did the family react to that?
For them, the sight was immediate proof of neurological failure. Eliza's reaction is visceral. She says, when they saw that, that made them think that there was something gone wrong with him. The laughter wasn't joy. It was disturbing. It was a symptom.
And Father O'Rourke, the clerical witness, he confirms this interpretation.
Yes. His demeanor, O'Rourke noted, was not one of prayer or sanctity. It was, in his words, a disturbed fixation. It was clear to him that the priest's rational faculties were gravely compromised. They escorted him home, but the die was cast. The story was out.
And Dr. White provides the medical synthesis that is so critical for our understanding of this moment.
He does. He states emphatically that this behavior is not characteristic of religious ecstasy or sanctity. Rather, it is a documented symptom in cases of certain neurological disorders or advanced psychiatric conditions.
So a medical issue, not a spiritual one.
Precisely. He says it points potentially to lesions on the brain affecting judgment and emotional regulation. It represents a definitive break from reality and clerical decorum.
And this is where we have to spend time on the specific pathology, because it feels like the Rosetta Stone for understanding his illness. Dr. White specifically connects that soft, uncontrollable laughter to his physical decline. He diagnoses it as a potential manifestation of pathological laughter.
And pathological laughter is a recognized neurological symptom. It often occurs with a condition called pseudobulbar palsy.
And why is that crucial?
Because pseudobulbar palsy is frequently, almost definably, associated with multiple strokes, which aligns perfectly with Flynn's documented history of successive cerebral hemorrhages.
So the eerie laughter wasn't the sound of a man who had gone insane in a spiritual sense.
No.
It was a physical short circuit. It was his body, his damaged brain, visibly failing.
Exactly. This medical detail shifts the confession box incident from being just a bizarre anecdote of madness to being a crucial, heartbreaking neurological symptom. It connects the physical and the psychological collapses into one event.
What were the consequences of this
Right.
highly visible, bizarre failure?
They were immediate and lasting. The police report, Document 6, confirms that this confession box incident is commonly cited in community gossip.
So it became his defining story.
It did. It significantly altered public perception. As long as he was just sick at home, it was an object of pity. But once he was found laughing softly in the dark of the confessional, it became unease.
Right.
Dubliners could understand paralysis. They could not understand a priest's private, disturbing breakdown in the most sacred space of his profession.
So the incident became the symbol of his total neurological and psychological breakdown. It transformed the Reverend Flynn from a revered Sikh scholar into a figure of questionable stability. This single act of uncontrollable pathological laughter defined his final reputation.
Which brings us to the aftermath of his death, the scene of mourning.
Yeah, the immediate aftermath of a death is always this moment of intense emotional contradiction, and Father Flynn's household was clearly no exception. The sources reveal this deep conflict between the narrative of a beautiful death and the raw, unaddressed grief and confusion.
And Eliza Flynn was determined to enforce the narrative of peace. This is all in Document 3. She insisted he was quite resigned at the end and had a beautiful death. She stresses over and over that Father O'Rourke had already administered the final sacraments, anointing and preparing him.
She needed that assurance.
Desperately. She needed to believe that he went peacefully, that he was ready to meet his maker, that everything was put right at the end.
But the reality of his decline, it fights against this peaceful ending, doesn't it? Eliza shares this profound, sad contradiction.
She does. Even in his final weeks, when he was clearly dying from that third and final stroke, he was still making these simple, hopeful plans for the future.
What kind of plans?
He kept promising that before the summer was over, he'd go out for a drive one fine day and take Eliza and Nanny with him to see the old house in Irishtown where they were all born.
Wow.
This little detail speaks volumes about the human tendency to deny impending death, or perhaps his own neurological damage was making him incapable of fully grasping his decline. It's this simple, poignant desire for vigor and a return to origin.
The last trip home.
A last trip home that he would never take. But despite this lingering sadness, the family strove for dignity, even in death. The woman who was hired to wash the body after he died remarked that he just looked as if he was asleep, looking that peaceful and resigned.
And Eliza latches onto that.
Oh, she takes immense pride in it. She states, "No one would think he'd make such a beautiful corpse." It's a strange thing to say, but you understand the need for it.
And we have to acknowledge the sisters themselves. Dr. White confirms their devotion was absolute.
He does, but he also notes that they were only equipped for the physical aspects. The comfort, the cleanliness, the beef tea. They were not equipped for the terrifying neurological and psychiatric demands of his condition.
They were in over their heads.
Completely. And they suffered in isolation. The police report notes they are currently in a state of exhausted grief, a simple phrase that encapsulates years and years of quiet, relentless suffering.
For the most vivid, unfiltered account of the mourning scene, we have to turn to the diary of the young boy, Document 5. His record of his visit on July 4th is just soaked in atmosphere.
It really is. The approach to the house is almost cinematic. The boy and his aunt arrive as the sun is setting, casting a tawny gold on the window panes.
So the external world is beautiful, which creates this immediate contrast with the silence and grief inside.
Exactly. And they are received by Nanny Flynn. The boy's description of her is devastatingly precise. He says she is so old and bent that her head was scarcely above the banister.
That's the physical toll of her devoted service, right there in one image.
Absolutely. And she guides them up to the dead room, the room of ceremony. The atmosphere in that room is so detailed. It was suffused with dusky golden light filtering through a lace blind, and the candles looked like pale, thin flames.
And the smell.
Yes. The heavy odor of flowers permeates the air. This sensory information just brings you, the listener, right into that room with them.
And as they kneel, the boy's focus isn't on the dead priest, not at first. It's on the living.
Right. He is distracted by Nanny's muttered prayers and this deeply human, slightly embarrassing detail.
Yeah.
The clumsy way her skirt was hooked at the back.
And her feet. He notes her feet.
He does. He notes her cloth boots, whose heels were trodden down to one side.
That detail, the trodden down heel, is such a powerful symbol. It speaks to physical exhaustion, maybe limited resources, or just years of neglecting her own appearance because she was too busy tending to her brother.
It transforms the Mrs. Flynn from these abstract, saintly caregivers into real figures of quiet, physical suffering.
And the boy, he initially expected the priest to be smiling. He had this fancy, probably based on the rhetoric of a beautiful death he'd heard.
Right, but as he moves to the head of the bed, the reality is stark. He was not smiling. He lay solemn and copious, vested as for the altar.
And here we see the deliberate staging of the scene. The priest's large hands were loosely holding a chalice,
The very object that symbolized his breakdown.
and his face is described as truculent, gray, and massive, with black, cavernous nostrils and a scanty white fur around it. The overall image is not one of peace at all, but of this heavy, almost imposing dignity.
And this staging is a very active attempt to restore his reputation. Father O'Rourke's memo confirms it. He says the family's decision to lay him out in full vestments, holding the chalice, was done specifically to restore a sense of dignity to his memory.
So they were overtly trying to overwrite the memory of him laughing in the confessional with this grand final image of sacerdotal rectitude.
It's a public relations act being performed in the dead room, a final attempt to control the narrative.
After the viewing, the ritual continues downstairs. Eliza sits in his armchair in state, which is a really interesting choice of words. She's symbolically claiming her new position as head of the grieving household.
And Nanny brings out sherry and glasses, and they drink in silence. It's a moment of adult communion and grief.
And then Eliza engages the aunt in conversation. She starts with the official narrative.
Right, the peaceful death, the anointing, the resignation. But then, it seems, driven by the need to explain the inexplicable, she confides the secrets.
She discloses the incident of the broken chalice as the start of his decline. And crucially, she shares the most damaging secret. Finding him in the confession box, sitting in the dark, wide awake and laughing softly to himself, which is what made them think something was wrong with him.
The secrecy of his breakdown is now being shared, but under the guise of grieving intimacy.
And she reiterates that he was too scrupulous and that the duties were just too much for him. And the aunt, who is a peer and an external observer, she validates this immediately. She agrees he was a disappointed man.
Which confirms that his fundamental unhappiness was known, at least to some, outside the immediate family circle.
And the young boy witnesses all of this. He feels physically and emotionally isolated from it. The silence is heavy, and he records feeling apart from it all, as if I were observing from a distance.
And he tastes the sherry.
He tastes the sherry, a small illicit experience in this overwhelming adult world, and he just absorbs the full weight of all the unspoken anxieties and these sudden, shocking revelations.
Which leads us to Father Flynn's most complex legacy. His decline had this unusual focal point, his relationship with this young boy, the one who kept the diary. This relationship was the final arena where his psychological crisis played out, and it led to significant community scrutiny.
Right. Document 4 details the intellectual rigor of the instruction he gave the boy. Flynn, in his retirement, focused on instructing this boy, giving him this deep grounding in Latin pronunciation, church history, and the intricate ceremonies of the Mass. This wasn't simple catechism.
Not at all. And the boy was deeply receptive to it, almost reverent. His diary shows he admired the sheer gravity of the priest's duties, handling the Eucharist, hearing confessions. He confessed to wondering how anyone could bear such responsibility.
So he felt the spiritual weight that had eventually crushed his mentor.
He absolutely did. And Flynn didn't just teach simple things. He posed these difficult, complex theological questions about mortal sins versus venial sins. He was trying to illustrate how complex the church is. He was instructing a young, very impressionable mind in the very moral labyrinth that had trapped him.
And we have to talk about the specific haunting word he taught the boy. Simony.
Yes. Flynn defined it as the buying or selling of ecclesiastical privileges, a profound betrayal of sacred trust. It's a very advanced, cynical concept to teach a child.
It is. And this complex concept, this word of clerical corruption, later haunted the boy's dreams, which illustrates just how deeply the priest's own anxieties about moral taint and failure had penetrated his student's psyche.
And this relationship was not universally approved of. The police report notes that initially, some people respected Flynn's scholarly reputation and viewed the mentorship favorably. But as the priest's stability waned, the community scrutiny grew much harsher.
And the most vocal opponent was a local resident, a Mr. Cotter. His criticism was sharp and public.
Very sharp. He stated bluntly that the deceased's influence was bad for children. Connor felt that young minds are impressionable and that this close association with a man of such unstable health was undesirable. This was a direct reaction to the rumors of Flynn's strange behavior.
And Connor's philosophy was one of robust pragmatism.
Completely. He advocated for a conventional upbringing. He said a lad should run about and play with young lads of his own age.
This view was reinforced by the boy's own uncle, wasn't it?
Yes, who championed physical vigor and the necessity of learning to box his corner, meaning learning to defend himself and navigate the practical physical world.
The police assessment labels this as a protective, if somewhat robust, philosophy of child rearing, which confirms the community concern over the intensity and perhaps the morbid focus of Flynn's mentorship, especially during his breakdown.
They felt the boy needed sunlight and action, not the dark, heavy weight of theological angst.
And the diary provides the final complex layer of this story, the cost of inheriting that anxiety. Before the death, the boy was highly agitated. He was watching the house window on Great Britain Street, waiting for the sign of death. He was looking for the candles reflected on the blind.
And he was forced to endure the public mockery of his mentor. At supper one night, old Cotter was speaking of Flynn with these tiresome hints and unfinished sentences, labeling him queer and uncanny.
And the boy's reaction to that?
He admits he had to cram his mouth with stirabout just to keep himself from shouting in defense of the priest. It shows the intense loyalty and the defensiveness he felt for his tutor.
But the emotional fallout really culminates in this terrifying dream he records immediately after the death.
It's an incredible passage. He sees the heavy gray face of the paralytic, and it murmured to me as if to confess something. He felt he was being drawn into a pleasant yet vicious region, which is this terrifying fusion of morbid fascination and moral guilt.
And he explicitly connects the dream back to his instruction. He remembers Flynn died of paralysis, and he feels himself smiling feebly back, as if to absolve him of some sin.
And the word simony echoed throughout the dream.
Right, so this suggests the boy internalized the idea that the priest carried some unconfessed or unabsolved moral failure, possibly related to that very taint of corruption he had been taught about. He's trying to process his teacher's damnation.
He is. And when the death card finally made the event real for him, the boy registered a deeply complicated reaction. He was disturbed at my own calmness. He felt a sensation of freedom. Freedom, as if an immense weight had been lifted from him. And this feeling was confusing and annoying to him because he respected Flynn so much. It resulted in this complex mixture of relief and guilt.
This internal struggle demonstrates just how deeply the priest's decline had imprinted on him. The editorial noted the youth's earlier association of the word paralysis with some maleficent and sinful being.
So his young mind was actively struggling to rationalize a physical disease as a kind of spiritual taint. He was absorbing the very scrupulosity that had destroyed his mentor.
And even the police noted the boy's lingering connection. They observed him loitering outside the residence on July 3rd, looking contemplative but not distressed. He was paying his respects, but also grappling with the profound, complicated legacy of his fallen teacher.
And after this exhaustive journey through the documents, it's clear that Reverend Flynn did not just suffer a physical breakdown. He achieved a state of total paralysis across every dimension of his life.
So let's synthesize these three interlocking failures. First, there's the physical paralysis.
Yeah.
The successive cerebral hemorrhages leading to the visible symptoms, the severe tremor,
The inability to hold his snuff.
the stupor, and ultimately the fatal apoplexy. His body simply quit on him.
Then, second, you have the spiritual and moral paralysis. This was triggered by the theologically trivial chalice incident, which his anxious mind inflated into this profound symbol of his own failure.
Right.
And this resulted in that acute scrupulosity, which was rooted in a psychological constitution that was already ill-suited to the immense demands of the Eucharist and the secrecy of the confessional. His spiritual vocation became his cage.
And finally, the social paralysis.
Yeah.
His physical withdrawal, combined with the bizarre visible symptom of pathological laughter in the confession box, led to that community unease.
And it shifted public perception completely. It reduced a scholarly man to a figure of questionable stability and drew this damaging scrutiny to his relationship with the young boy.
The editorial summarized the risk inherent in this isolated decline. It said that Flynn's personal demons had cast a long shadow.
And that his fixation on the arcane matters of sin and dogma lacked the levity and simplicity essential to childhood, providing a heavy, morbid education that was potentially damaging to his young student.
So Flynn's case provided a chilling cautionary tale for Dublin society at the time, and it was articulated very clearly in that editorial. It underscored the desperate need for balance and oversight and mentorship, especially for highly intense relationships like this one.
It did. The editorial essentially validates the practical philosophy of Mr. Cotter and the uncle. It concluded that mentorship must be conducted within a broader framework of healthy social interaction and physical activity.
In other words, kids need to be kids.
Exactly. Character formation requires stability, joy, and diverse experiences. And those who seek to shape young minds must themselves be grounded and stable.
And Father O'Rourke, the official anchor in all this, he provides the final, careful clerical conclusion, his confidential memo. He frames Flynn as a man broken by the weight of his office.
He does. O'Rourke stresses that this private struggle must be kept confidential, reflecting on the fate of one vulnerable servant, not the enduring strength of the church itself. But even in that attempt to compartmentalize, the sources show just how deeply his personal crisis affected the entire community.
So we have meticulously traced the specific details of Reverend Flynn's decline, using every fragment of evidence we have. The diagnosis of pseudobulbar palsy,
The shame of the spilled snuff, the profound effort to stage dignity with the chalice in the coffin.
the raw poverty symbolized by Nanny's worn boots, and that shared silent drink of sherry. Every documented element contributes to this tragic image of a life that achieved a total paralysis of body, mind, and spirit.
It's a complete picture of collapse.
And yet what lingers, what really stays with you, is the unresolved burden that's carried forward by the young boy. The man he admired died, and the family claims it was a peaceful resignation. But the boy is left with this confusing inheritance, freedom mixed with guilt.
And he's haunted by that image of the paralytic's gray face murmuring as if to confess something, and him smiling back as if to absolve him of some sin.
The formal records provided the medical and clerical closure. They tied up all the loose ends. But that final haunting dream of the boy suggests something was left unsaid, something unconfessed.
Perhaps relating to that taint of simony he was taught about. Though the family staged his death to restore his honor, the documents imply a deeper, private failure remained.
And that profound ethical mystery, the mystery of the unconfessed, is the knowledge that you carry forward from this deep dive.